U.S. pistol, caliber .45, model 1911. The peak of handgun technology. As good as handguns will ever get. This is all you need for 1911 and onwards and into the present day. Nah, it ain't that. So the 1911 is a venerable gun. It served the U.S. military for a very long time. But people have this notion that it is still a viable combat weapon or a viable self-defense weapon. Guys, it just ain't. This ain't a modern gun. You'll notice the name is Model 1911. Sorry, I bumped the tripod there. This is a gun from 1911. Actually, the development of this started in like 1900 or 1903. When John Browning was making the forerunners to this gun. There are so many elements of this gun that are superfluous or antiquated and just shouldn't be there. Yes, there are a lot of features about this gun that are modern and kind of set the basis for what we think of as handguns today. You pick it up and you compare it to a modern gun, and yeah, they feel and they look very similar. You'll be able to pick this up and use it, no problem, if you're familiar with modern guns. But this isn't a modern gun. And I will show you why very clearly by comparing it to a modern gun. This is a CZ-P07. I will show you all of the things that make this a modern gun and this not. So to first get through that, we're going to disassemble both of these guns. And I think to make my point, I'm going to disassemble the 1911 first. Sorry for bumping that again. It's hard to work with my arms around a tripod. So first thing you have to do when disassembling any gun is, of course, remove the magazine. This is, of course, the first failing of this gun. This is a single stack 45 caliber magazine that holds 7 rounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sometimes you can even get magazines that go up to 8 rounds. Versus the P07, which goes up to 15 plus 2 on the base plate, so this is 17. Next thing you need to do is check that it's clear, and it is in fact clear. Now we're going to apply the safety because it makes the next step easier, which is to remove the barrel bushing. What you do is you press this plunger down, it's kind of stiff, and turn barrel bushing, come on, 90 degrees. And then you can take spring plunger out as well as the spring. Now you can disengage the safety because we need to move the slide back until this round cutout is lined up with this notch on the slide stop, so we can just push that out. The slide stop comes out. Now the slide will be able to come up off the front. We're left with the frame. Now the spring guide rod can come out. Take the barrel bushing and rotate it until it hits a stop counterclockwise that way. The barrel bushing will now come out, and then the barrel comes out the front. And you have now successfully field stripped the 1911 to do basic maintenance, cleaning, and whatever. Now I'll take a second to put this to the side so I can get the P07 in frame. All right, now we have the P07. First thing we're going to do is exactly the same thing. We're going to take the magazine out, a double stack 17 round magazine, a gun that is roughly the same size. Oh, funny that. So this is the first advantage that we have, is that this holds way more rounds than 1911 does. But anyway, we'll get to more on that later. So now the next thing you need to do to disassemble the P07 is line up these 2 notches on the slide and the frame, which coincidentally lines up with the half-cock notch of the hammer. Now you need to push out the slide stop. What I do that is I put my palm over the muzzle. Actually, don't worry, it's unloaded. See, unloaded. Push that back because that lines up with the hammer, and then use both my thumbs to push the slide stop out. Now I can just pull it out. Now the slide will come off of the frame, and now we're just left with the empty frame. And then we can take the captive recoil spring assembly out, and if I felt like taking this thread protector off, because this is a suppressor ready gun, I can then take the barrel out, but I'm not going to do that. I don't feel like it. And there you go. CZP07 completely field stripped. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Versus the 1911, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. I just counted them off camera. Now, just to drive my point home further, I'm going to disassemble an even simpler gun, CZP-10C. This, for all intents and purposes, is going to disassemble like a lock. So first thing we do, take the magazine out, make sure it's clear, drop the striker. What you do is you pull it back just a little bit, pull, slide stop, comes off the frame. One piece, ignore the light. Captured recoil spring, barrel comes out. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, 1 part less than even the P07 in all its simplicity. So as you can see, the 1911, when disassembled, is a yard sale compared to the P07. And that's because this is very old technology. There are a bunch of parts in here that are just superfluous and they're not necessary, but that's because this is a very early design. People were still figuring out what a handgun was supposed to be, what needed to be there. I mean, contemporary to this, you had stuff like the P08 Luger, the 1912 Steyr-Hahn, and the 1900 FN pocket pistols, everything that they made. This was very modern for the time, but like I said, that was only because this is one of the first, and it has so many other features that are just antiquated, not necessary anymore. They've been removed from subsequent designs because they were unnecessary. So we'll start with also elements from the frames of these guns. Let's take this one part at a time. The 1911 obviously is made out of steel. This P07, or you can use any other polymer frame gun for your example, this is polymer. Polymer is lighter, it is sufficiently strong, and it doesn't have issues with corrosion or rust that a steel frame does. So +1 point to the polymer frame guns. This is perfectly sufficient for any military or police or whatever. Stuff doesn't have to be made out of steel. They used steel in 1911 because that was the best material they had for it. You couldn't exactly make it out of wood. Aluminum was still prohibitively expensive. So this was the only choice they had. They would have used better materials they could have done. Also, the 1911 is single action only. Why? That's not really necessary. P07 here is double and single action. Why limit yourself to one? People always go on about how nice the 1911 trigger is. Now, this is a bone standard 1911. This is a Rock Island Armory. You could probably see on the slide. There's nothing really special about this. So this is probably as basic a 1911 as you're going to get, and probably what a GI had when he was in trenches of World War I. Unlikely, they didn't issue very many of these in World War I, or more likely World War II. And I took a trigger gauge to this and my P07. The trigger on the 1911 is quite short. It doesn't have much take up, but it breaks at roughly 5 3/4 pounds, 12 ounces, I think it came out to be on average. And that is heavier than what this came out to be. This was more like 3.8, 3.7 in that range. I had more take up, was a bit squishier, but it broke lighter. And in my opinion, I can deal with the squishy trigger as long as it breaks light. Now, 5 3/4 is by no means bad. I've used worse, but this trigger, this single action only trigger, is actually heavier than all of my other handguns, period. Even the CZ82, which is still DASA, has a lighter trigger break than the 1911 does. Now, there's one more element to the frame that I need to bring up, which I actually need to use the barrel on the P07 to demonstrate, and that is the 2-piece feed ramp that the 1911 uses. We're going to get to the barrel of this. So part of the feed ramp from the magazine, you put it in, the cartridge feeds out of here, and that shiny bit there is part of what feeds the rounds into the barrel, and the rest of it, as you can see, is here, a polished bit. On the P07, get the barrel in the view, the feed ramp is one piece that is all integral with the barrel. Now that gives you a smooth, continuous, uninterrupted feedway to get the rounds smoothly into the chamber. This is fine if you're just using ball ammo, but when you start getting into defensive ammo, which is usually hollow points, jacketed hollow points, that kind of thing, this becomes a problem. All of a sudden there's a break there that a not round nose hollow point could get caught up on and cause jams. Frequently that is what happens. So this, you don't see it on guns after the 1911 because it's a bad idea. Another thing, while I have the barrel in my hand that you don't see under the gun, is the swinging link. This is another vestigial feature on the 1911 that does not need to be there because most other guns, starting with the Browning high power, use a cam. And on the P07, it's like a CZ75 where it uses the cylinder stop pin as the actual cam. On a Browning high power, it's a dedicated lug that is pressed into the frame. But on the 1911, it uses this still as more like an anchor point. It's not the actual cam because the barrel is actually swinging. With this, you need to make the link and the barrel a separate part and then pin them together. That's 3 different parts to accomplish what everything else does with one. This is a feature that died with the 1911. Something that took a little bit longer to die is the dedicated locking lugs that are on the barrel. Now, if you look at most modern guns, they do something quite a bit more elegant, and they use the front of the chamber to lock into the outside of the slide. This is a lot simpler to make. It is quite a bit stronger and much more resilient to debris getting into that locking space and causing a hang-up. So you'll see this has, 1911 has matching recesses that are cut into the slide. So if those get fouled up with anything, dirt, mud, carbon, whatever, then the gun won't be able to get into battery and it won't fire. You effectively have a useless gun. This feature held out longer than the swinging link did. This is on the Browning high power, subsequently the CZ75. But on most guns after that, Glocks, P07s, P10Cs, that feature goes away because it's unnecessary. Actually, in the very early guns, this is another part that had to be fitted in, and to fit it, they actually used the proof load at the factory to set the locking lugs in place. Used an overpressure load to make sure that these 2 surfaces were mated together. Very high tech. So moving on now to the spring assemblies. The spring assembly of the 1911 is 3 pieces. They're on the visual here. You have the guide rod, the spring itself, and the plunger, or the cup that sits underneath the barrel bushing. On the P07, most other guns, modern guns, it's 1 piece. This is all captive. You don't take it apart. And if something goes wrong with this, you can just replace it all as 1 unit. It goes in easily. There's nothing to lose here, just the whole thing. Especially this plunger cup. This is totally unnecessary. You'll see on some guns like the CZ75, they actually used to use the whole underside of the slide to hold that in place. And here it's just an end cup that holds the end of the captive recoil system. This is another totally unnecessary part that does not need to be there and was eliminated from subsequent designs like the high power, the 75. Speaking of superfluous parts, we have the most superfluous of them all, a removable barrel bushing. This is also something you don't see anywhere else because it is just totally gone from subsequent designs. The bearing surface of the slide and the barrel is just the slide. There's no need for this to be a separate piece at all. It serves no function, and of course, smarter people than myself saw this and decided to chuck it because there's just an extra piece that needed to be made and fitted and needed to work properly, so just get rid of it. It doesn't need to be there. Stepping back to the frames for a moment, let's get back to that single action, double action feature. Since the Colt, the 1911, is single action only, you have to have some kind of safety mechanism to lock the hammer in place. Press that, it's not going to go. But it also has a grip safety. Why? Because this was originally designed for the US Cavalry, and they were worried. Originally, this gun, when it was in development, did not have the manual safety. This was added very, very late. It only had the grip safety. Of course, at the time that made sense, because it was your only safety. But it was also something that you didn't have to think about engaging or disengaging. When you drop this in the holster, it was disengaged. When you went to draw it and you were going to shoot it, then it's engaged. And once you add the manual safety, then this is a superfluous item. Actually, both of these are superfluous items. You choose one or the other, you don't need both. The grip safety honestly can go away because it's another part that let dirt and gunk in, and you have to be holding the gun in a certain way in order to actually shoot it. Z75 has no such, or not 75, P07 has no such grip safety. So you can hold this however you want, however loosely you want, and the gun will still fire. It also has a much more elegant way of making sure the gun is safe, which is to be a DASA. It is both double action or single action. And if you want to carry it safely, you just use the decocker here to decock the hammer. And then the safety mechanism is the long double action pull. Although the double action break on this is still quite good. Now, the 1911 is a venerable piece of firearms history. They have a very long service life with the US military. They've seen a lot of action all over the world. They are very interesting guns to own, very fun guns to shoot. I've had a lot of fun actually shooting this. But is it a good, viable, modern combat or self-defense handgun? No, it is not. We have better options. We have much better options. People have tried to modernize the 1911. That's a fool's errand because you're limited by the caliber, all the components, all the manufacturing that's going into this, the magazines. You're just limiting yourself to this great big brick of a gun for nothing more than nostalgia. We have made progress. Please take advantage of it. If you just want to shoot this for fun, that is cool. That is what I'm going to be doing with it. But if you're seriously advocating that someone carry this over a Glock 19, that's foolish. Hope you learned something from this. Really hope you do. So please, thank you for watching. Goodbye.